good afternoon, everyone. How y'all doing? Awesome. Happy International Women's Day, a day early. Of course, we know every day is Women's Day, right? So, my name is Camille Richardson, and I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of the Middle East and Africa at the U.S. Department of Commerce. That's a very long, boring government title, but what makes my job exciting is the opportunity to work on things that I love and that I'm really passionate about, things that are transformational and can make a real difference. And so what we noticed a couple of years ago was that women were being among those most adversely impacted, both socially and economically, by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we created a program called Women Empowered Leave Legacies through Trade and Investment. Now, because I work for the government and we love our acronyms, we nicknamed it WELLTI, W-E-L-L-T-I. And the whole point of it was to inspire women to get involved in economic recovery. You know, don't be a victim, be at the vanguard. So I know from working in this industry, in the international trade industry for the past, almost 30 years, the trade is a means to recover faster economically. So through the WELLTI initiative, we featured inspiring stories from women throughout the Middle East and Africa to either inspire women to get into the trade game or to up their game in trade. And we were able to expose women to different opportunities, different markets, and we knew we were doing the right thing at the right time because of the way that it grew so quickly and because of the widespread acceptance. I think that DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility have really become the order of the day. And we understand that if we are to move forward, we must move forward together, and that women can and should and must be part of that equation. So we are here today with some friends from nonprofit and from the private sector to just showcase what we can do together when we link arms and we really focus on making the world a different place by being truly transformative. So here today we have Jim Jones, who is the Director of Global Community Programs at ExxonMobil, welcome. Community Programs and Strategy, and Dr. Ann Hudock, who is the President and CEO of Counterpart International. So I'm going to ask them a few questions and you'll get a little bit of information and we'll move forward with today's panel. So Ann, let's start with you. Please tell us about the Global Women in Management, or GWIM program.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you very much. The GWIM program is a very beloved program, and it's important to note that we're the stewards of this iteration of the program. It started in 1978, long before Jim and I and Counterpart and ExxonMobil were born or working on it. And I say that because we're stewards for this generation of it. One of our program participants in Egypt talks about it as a lifelong learning journey. And she's now looking to replicate this program nationwide in Egypt. And I think that's indicative of how people receive this training. It is so much more than training. Yes, it does give them skills in advocacy or public speaking or budgets, but what it really does is transformation. And it's transformation, I think, on 4 levels. The first is a personal transformation, where people begin to see something different for their lives. Like you said, not being that victim. The second is within their family. We often see that through the economic empowerment activities, when women start to earn some more money, then they start to be taken a little differently in the home. And then at the community level, there's a ripple effect that gets created from the work that's being done. And lastly, there's a national level impact. We have a recent story of one of our graduates. Her name is Dr. Renata Amaral. She was a renowned trade activist working in Brazil. She went on this program. She said, I see new possibilities for myself. And she became a professor at American University. Her enthusiasm for the program was so deep that I said, I think you should join the Counterpart board. And just weeks ago, really, she was named the Secretary of International Development and Affairs in Brazil. So that's what I mean when it has even a nationwide impact.
That's awesome, Ann. Thank you for that. So Jim, from the private sector perspective, can you talk about, from ExxonMobil's philosophy, about the importance of focusing on women's leadership and management training?
I'm happy to. And first, let me thank you, Deputy Secretary, for showing up and here today and moderating this. It means a lot to have the United States government's imprimatur here, and thank you to the Chamber Foundation for hosting this. I think I've been to all 13 annual International Women's Day forums here, so whoever laughed when I said I was born before 1978, thank you, and the rest of you, I'm glad you believe that, so that was good. For us, there's a journey that we as a company went on with our investment in women's economic empowerment that I think is very similar to a lot of multinational corporations that invest heavily in this space in terms of what they do. And for us, it began by asking a simple question that you ask in the private sector and you ask in business, which is, how do I get the biggest return for my investment? So we were tasked by the president of the ExxonMobil Foundation at the time to answer a simple question, which is, if you had $1 to invest in women's economic empowerment programs, how's that dollar best spent? And although the question's easy, the answer was really complicated. We set about talking to everybody that was an expert in this space in academia, at Harvard, at MIT, at Oxford, at Stanford, and then in think tanks at Brookings and all of the places that around town, and also in the developing world. And it was really clear that there was no one answer to it. Everybody had their pet project that they touted, whether it was in microfinance or lending, insurance products. What was the silver bullet that got you to and moved the needle on women's economic empowerment? So we commissioned our own study and invested in 38 different research groups that panned the academic literature and the empirical data to give us a better sense in terms of how we should operate. And we did it for our own purposes, but it became so valuable, I think, to the field that it was published. It's online, you can look at it. It's called womeneconroadmap.org. The study is called Roadmap for Promoting Women's Economic Empowerment, again, done for our purposes, but we made it available to the public. And it really tells you very clearly, based on empirical data, what are those programs that are proven to work, which are the ones that are promising, which are the ones that need more research, and frankly, there were programs that were identified that don't work in terms of moving the needle on women's economic empowerment. I'm happy to do a whole TED talk for you on all of this, but suffice it to say, for the purposes of what you asked me, that investing in leadership models became, across almost every demographic group, a vitally important piece of the puzzle in terms of making women more economically participatory in their economies.
So clearly, both of you have been thinking about this for a long time, well before it became stylish to say #DEIA. But we've had a couple of curveballs in the last few years. We've had, as I referenced before, the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had the Ukraine-Russia conflict that's created all kinds of supply chain disruptions for everyone around the world. So what were some of the challenges, Anne, that you faced building during this time?
It's a great question, and as I mentioned, in some form or another, this program was going since 1978 as an in-person training course that was really about that personal transformation. That's very hard to do without that engagement. So with COVID, we couldn't do what we had always done. And it's then that you really treasure, more so than ever, a great partner like GWIM and the ExxonMobil Foundation, because they were right there with us and said, we'll help you turn this into an online program so we don't need to stop the support to the women at a time when they're so isolated and they need it most. And they helped support us to develop the online platform that, frankly, now is an asset that we can use even, I don't know that we're post-COVID, but in this new world. And it was really empowering for the women because at a time when they were so shut behind closed doors and their countries were closed off, we were setting up the training over a series of weeks on different time zones in order to match where they were in the world. And we found soon into the program, they were actually calling in on both time zones. So the African participants were calling in on the Asia time zone as well as on their own time zone, which to me was a real indicator of the need. And what if we had just said, we'll wait until COVID finishes and we'll come back in person. And so I think that partnership, that flexibility, and that desire to really help people where they are, I think enabled us to move very differently. And on Ukraine, I'll say that as we all watched the horror of what was happening and continues to happen there, especially for women, seeing those women coming out with their children without prospects of jobs necessarily, we knew that we had to do something, however small it could be. So we worked with colleagues in Romania, again, thanks to the support and the connections through the ExxonMobil Foundation, and we were able to give psychosocial support first and foremost, mental health and wellness training for those women. And I'd just like to also give a shout out to Kate Spade, who taught us years ago that that's what you have to do first. And the work that they did in Rwanda, I think, really paved the way, was very pioneering. And so taking a page from that book, we did that training, and then we were able to do job skill training and some job fairs, and hopefully create, again, a network for those women to support one another.
So it's important to draw from what's gone before and to take the lessons forward. So, Jim, how do you think that the public and private sectors can take some of these lessons forward and best partner during whatever crisis we're in?
So we hear a lot about public-private partnerships. I wish I had $1 for every time somebody mentioned public-private partnerships, because I think it's a nice thing to throw out as a concept, and I think it's a really important part of the development agenda. I guess the only thing I'd say about that may be a little bit heretical to my counterparts in the private sector is that I think it's very important that the private sector approaches public-private partnerships in the spirit of that last word, of partnership. And while we can bring certain important aspects of that partnership to the table, including funding, and I appreciate all the thanks that Anne's giving us right now. I have to say that the funding is only one aspect of this, that the partnership exists and it works and it's successful because there's a funder, but then there's also an implementer. And when you sit around a table and one of those partners becomes more important than the other because of money, the partnership is almost doomed to fail. So I think what makes this successful, I'm sorry if that was really, people at ExxonMobil didn't know I was going to say that, so sorry if they're listening, but that's what you get. But I think what makes this partnership really fundamentally successful is that the government piece of this, whether it's from the United States government, it's been enormously supportive, especially the Department of Commerce, in what we do in this program around the world, together with the resources and the acumen of the private sector. And we help by providing resources, but also providing other things, the core competencies that make us successful as a business, whether that's marketing, communications, just project management. How do you get from A to B in the most cost-effective, reasonable way? And then the expertise of people who work on the ground and deliver the programs. I think when you get together around the table and everybody's viewing each other's strengths and respecting them, I think that's what makes this program successful. I'm sorry. That's what I think.
That's a great answer. Just no need to apologize. But focusing back on the specific topic of women's economic empowerment, can you talk about why it's important to ExxonMobil and why it's important to the business community?
This is usually the first question people ask me. Why is a big energy company so heavily invested in women's economic empowerment? So I'm glad it's kind of coming toward the end of this. But it's to me, it's not just a nice thing to do. It's never viewed by people at our headquarters as something that's fun to do because of something that we call CRS or philanthropy or whatever. This is a core part of our business. Women are an untapped economic resource in every country, including the United States. So if we're going to prosper as a business, we need prosperous, healthy communities in which to operate. If you don't have that, we're not going to succeed. So if you look at what are the key drivers of economic development almost any place in the world, they're going to be women. Women drive business forward, drive economies forward. We have a saying inside the company that when women move, the world moves with them. This is a crucial aspect of our business. So for us, investing in women's economic empowerment, increasing our supply chain with women-owned businesses is just a fundamental way that we have of looking at the world. Last year, even during COVID, we still invested $500 million a year in women-owned businesses as part of our supply chain. So while the work that we do with Anne is vitally important to reach communities, there's also a key part of this that's a business driver.
Well, I think that now everyone's looking for alternate sources of supply, right? So that makes sense from a bottom line business model. So Anne, what's next for GWIM?
I think what's next is we really need to build this network. You know, I keep mentioning how far back it goes. Many of these women, if you say the GWIM word to them, that brand it warms their heart because they were transformed through those experiences. And imagine the power of taking each of them and really having some resources to dedicate to growing that network, to providing additional skills. They do peer-to-peer training informally. We do some of it formally with support, again, from Jim and the ExxonMobil Foundation. But I think to really see the power of this, we need to build out that network. We need to really get these women, their communities, and their social enterprises or their businesses into many more companies' supply chains in the spirit of inclusive supply chains. And I believe if we could even do something as simple as an awards banquet every year to lift up and celebrate 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 of these women, it would give that demonstration effect to women around the world. And that's what we need to see now. You know, there's the tall poppy syndrome, where as soon as women are elevated, they're cut down. We need to guard against that, and we need to recognize that women need support, they need the power in numbers, and I think we need to keep seeing those positive role models.
Well, thank you both for that. I think that there's so much information out there. And I think, you know, because it's a big world and because there's so many people in it, we always have to kind of select, you know, our dot, you know, who's our audience. But I would just sort of put out a call to action to everyone here. You know, we know that when we empower women with information, with data, with contacts, with resources, they're going to take that home to their families, they're going to take that home to their communities, and they're going to have a much bigger impact that can be truly transformative. It's almost like a ripple effect, and I like to say the ripple can turn into a wave. And so I think, just think about that, each of you. It's a call to action. You know, who around you could use a little inspiration? Who around you could use a little bit of information? You know, who can you share, you know, resources and information with such that you're able to uplift them and we're not cutting poppies. We're planting fields and we're feeding families and we're helping people to move forward. There's going to be another crisis. We know that. That's just the way the world operates now. So in anticipation of that, I think it's important to take some of the lessons that we've learned to figure out who we can help, who we can point in the right direction, and how we can be intentional as government, as nonprofits, as private sector about economically including women, economically including disadvantaged or deserving communities, you know, in our new growth story. This is a new world that we live in. And I'm going to leave you with one interesting statistic that I think will be impactful, and I hope it sticks in your brain, focusing on women. If women were educated and employed at the same rate as men, the global economy could grow by $28 trillion a year. That's what we're leaving on the table. Thank you.
Wow, thank you.